Welcome to American Dragon Presents Chinese Medicine in America. My name is Joel Penner.
And I'm E. Douglas Kine.
We're both doctors of Oriental medicine and California licensed acupuncturists and herbalists. We're also professors of Oriental medicine and have been teaching this subject in the schools here in Southern California for almost 20 years. This episode's subject is the 8 Principles Part 2. Doug will be presenting, so I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome.
I think the first thing we want to pick up is a syndrome that we call exterior deficiency. Now, we don't need to add hot or heat or cold to this because the temperature really is not important to this specific syndrome. Exterior deficiency really means that the exterior is deficient. It is not able to protect against exterior invaders. Another way of saying that would be Wei Qi deficiency. Those two terms are generally synonymous, right? And what we see, and I've seen this so many times in my clinic, the principal manifestation is someone who is catching colds and flu and just can't shake it. And it just goes on and on. Of course, that's a deficiency. Deficiency tends to be chronic, but they just can't shake it. And what we usually see with these people is that they've been to MDs and they've taken antibiotics and it just seems to make it worse. Well, we really understand this syndrome, and what we have to do for this person is not go after the invaders per se. What we have to do is seal the exterior so that no more invasion takes place, and then tonify that Wei Qi, principally by tonifying the digestion, which produces all Qi, of course.
Right.
Other symptoms that we see along with this very commonly are fatigue. Of course, any kind of Qi deficiency is going to be accompanied by fatigue or tiredness. And another thing that we see commonly is what we call spontaneous sweating. That is when the sweat comes out with just very little effort at all, or even no effort. It's just people will start sweating. And the reason is that the Wei Qi controls the pores. So not only the Wei Qi not only keeps invaders from coming in, but also keeps the fluids inside.
Right.
It controls those gates on the skin. So when the Wei Qi is deficient, as in exterior deficiency, we have things going in and things going out. It's not a good situation, so that needs to be strengthened. And a fourth might be, we might say, a superficial weak pulse. I would include that.
Right.
Superficial, of course, indicating that it's on the exterior. The problem is on the exterior, and then a weak, very weak or frail pulse would indicate that the Qi is deficient. So that is what exterior deficiency would look like, and what I've seen it so many times in my clinic. Would you have anything to say about that, Joel? Anything to add?
Nope.
Okay.
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well,
You did just fine, Doug.
all right. And so, I think it's time to move on.
Okay, what's
to
next?
To our next set of syndromes. Well, we've finished exterior. So now we go interior. We're going to talk about interior syndromes. Interior, of course, involves organs. Now, most interior problems are endogenous, which means they're created on the inside, but there are interior problems that are exogenous. That is, they're originally invaders from the exterior, and they get past that Wei Qi and they get inside into the organs and cause problems. And it can be any organs, really. Very commonly we see lungs and stomach as victims of an exogenous pathogen that happens to get inside causing a problem. So, for example, when wind heat gets past the wei qi in the throat and the sinuses and gets into the lungs, that would be an interior problem with a heavy cough and thick yellow phlegm. That we would call interior heat excess.
Excess, right.
So it's an excess problem that got inside, interior, and it's heat because of the yellow phlegm. So let's talk about that for right now. Let's talk about interior heat as a general category. We can divide that into two subtypes. There's interior heat excess and there's interior heat deficiency. And when we say these things, when we say three of these principles together, what we're really saying is interior plus heat plus deficiency, or interior plus heat plus excess. These are all three together, coming together to form a syndrome. And so interior heat excess is extremely common in our culture here in the United States. I think it's largely due to all of the hurrying and worrying that goes on, I mean, to put it very succinctly. You know, it's the basis of all these autoimmune disorders. It's the basis of inflammation. Inflammation is epidemic in this country. And these inflammatory disorders can hit any organ. And so we see symptoms and signs that indicate heat. We've gone through some of that heat already. Let's go through some of these interior signs and symptoms that indicate interior heat excess. Okay. First of all, we want to talk about the mind, or the heart, the shen. We see a lot of hurrying, but then it gets into agitation. Agitation, rage, anger, irritation, all of this suggests heat. Not only heart, but liver heat, which, liver will be combined with, liver heats up very easily, by the way, as you'll learn in future lectures. We'll also see insomnia, very common. Tossing and turning, even sweating at night, inappropriate sweating, because it's the heat that keeps us awake. It's the heat that wakes us up. So, at night we want to be cool and sleepy, but it's that heat that won't let us rest. Restlessness, restless leg. You ever see somebody sitting there like this? They're under, they've got heat, right? You ever see somebody racing their car up to a red light? This is heat. And why are they racing? Why are they going fast? Remember that all this speed creates friction, and that friction creates heat. It's just simple physics. We can see this in multitasking, people doing things all at the same time. All this is creating friction, creating heat. So, now that heat will travel up, because of course heat rises, and it can take acid from the stomach up into the mouth. That acid, sour taste in the mouth, bad breath. Well, that could indicate stomach heat, for example. Bitter taste coming up. That's coming up, of course, from the liver gallbladder. That's heat again, rushing upwards. We'll see a lot of heat problems in the upper body, although it's not confined to the upper body. But we'll see a lot of red eyes, eye problems, sinusitis. And that reminds me, anything with itis. What does itis mean? It means inflammation. Anything with itis, like sinusitis or pharyngitis or workitis or all kinds of itis.
A red face too.
Red face, that's right. Red tongue, yellow coat, rapid pulse. All of this indicate rapid, full pulse, strong pulse. All of this, of course, indicates interior heat excess. Then we get down to the bowels. Heat will dry out the fluids, and so you get thirst, you'll get constipation, hard, dry stool, scanty urine, yellow, strong odor. That's another thing, is that excess heat expands outward. So if you take molecules and you apply heat to them, they're going to start expanding. They're going to start going crazy and going outward. And so heat is going to radiate, and that's a very important distinguishing symptom as opposed to interior heat deficiency. We'll talk about that next. But the excess heat is going to radiate out, and you can actually feel it. If it's on the surface of the skin, you can feel it. It will feel hot. It will be coming out. So it will dry out the stool, causing chronic constipation, for example, and chronic thirst or excess thirst, dryness of sinuses, dryness of skin even. So this is a pretty good rendition, I think, of interior excess heat. Very, very common, can be very minor, can be very major and life-threatening. So. Now, interior heat deficiency, of course, means interior plus heat plus deficiency. And what this looks like is mysterious heat that is felt by the patient. But you really can't feel it yourself by putting your hand to an affected part because it's not radiating. What has happened here is that the yin has dropped. Remember that the yin controls the yang and balances the yang. So when that yin drops, what you have here is the semblance of excess yang, but it really isn't. But it feels like there's heat. See, but that cooling system is broken.
Right.
That's the problem. So it's really synonymous with yin deficiency.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, yin deficiency doesn't mean yin plus deficiency. It means deficient yin. Okay, I know I'm confusing you, but no, okay. So interior heat deficiency. We're going to see that in people who don't have enough yin, and that's where we see a lot of these interior heat deficiency symptoms and signs. Well, let's go through some of these. Well, first of all, I would expect to see strange fevers that they're going to complain about. Like, for example, what's known as a tidal fever that comes in the same time every day, usually in the afternoon around kidney time. They'll feel that. There's also something called steaming bone fever. That's where the bones feel like they're steaming, and it's very uncomfortable and painful, and they'll complain about it. But I don't know that that really shows up on any Western tests. It's a subjective complaint. Yeah. Of course, they'll be very thirsty, tend to be very thirsty, that high thirst. Could be either deficiency or excess, but in this case it's of course a lack of fluids, a lack of yin. We'll also see something called a malar flush. This is not just general redness, but it's a butterfly pattern across the nose and middle part of the face. It's like a butterfly redness that comes up with interior heat deficiency. The tongue will be most unusual. Don't forget that this is shriveled. This is a shriveled body, and the tongue is going to be shriveled, and it's going to be red. Plus, we will not expect to see a coat. You know, a thin white coat is normal.
Right.
That's normal yin. That's just the smoke of your digestive process coming up and laying a nice little layer of yin on the tongue. Well, this person doesn't have enough yin. So, not only will there be no coat, there tend to be cracks in that tongue. Fissures even. Now, some people are born fissures, so you can't take that in every single case, but generally when you're seeing interior heat deficiency, you will see some fissures and cracks in a tongue, and it could be very painful as well. Speech will be rapid, and instead of forceful, like interior heat excess, it'll be reedy, thin, a thin quality. And the shen will be scattered and, well, agitated. Agitated and scattered. The mind will be agitated and scattered, not really thinking that clearly. The pulse typically is thin, very thin, because again, we're looking at not enough yin. And rapid, heat.
Right.
And probably medium to deep level, because it is interior. So that's a good summary, I think, of interior plus heat plus deficiency.
Okay.
Interior plus cold plus excess is a situation that is either going to be minor or very quickly life-threatening. Let me explain that to you. We have a pilot burner inside that keeps us warm. We're warm-blooded creatures. That pilot burner needs to be warm all the time. Now, as human beings, we use clothing, fire, warm foods, shelter to keep us warm against the atmosphere. When you think about it, we're 98.6 degrees inside Fahrenheit, and the exterior temperature is usually going to be colder than that. So we have to constantly fight against that cold. And that's why we need that life gate fire. We need clothing, shelter, warm clothes.
And that life gate fire is called Mingmen fire.
That is Mingmen fire.
And so you'll hear that term in the future.
That will be repeated.
So you'll know what it is.
So we're always protecting ourselves against exogenous excess cold, this cold outside that really wants to get inside and cause damage. Now, when it does get inside, that can be life-threatening, and that's called exposure. If we are exposed to cold temperature for too long a period of time, this would be an exogenous, created on the outside, exogenous cold invading the interior, getting into the organs and causing interior excess cold. That can be a life-threatening situation. We can also swallow cold poisons like lye or bleach. These are cold operating poisons. That can also be very life-threatening. When cold enters quickly into the internal organs, it's either life-threatening or minor. Now, minor would be if you swallow too much ice water or swallow an ice cube. Did you ever swallow an ice cube, Joel?
I have.
I recommend nobody swallows an ice cube. It is very, very uncomfortable.
It causes cold cramping and pain in the abdomen.
It's terrible. But you know, your body has enough fire inside, has enough yang, usually, to deal with that. So we're not going to take medicine for it, although a hot tea is certainly a good thing for that. But that would be, again, interior excess cold. It would be rather temporary.
Right. It's generated from the outside, however.
Yeah.
In Chinese medicine, we really don't have any syndromes that are generated internally, any cold syndromes that are generated internally.
That's right, and that's because we're warm-blooded.
Excess cold.
Yes, we're warm-blooded creatures, so we're not going to generate excess cold. It will always be exogenous, created from the outside. And now we come to interior cold deficiency. That means interior plus cold plus deficiency. And here we're really talking about yang deficiency, where that yang just isn't able to rise up to the level where it heats the body appropriately. And the symptoms are going to be a chronic cold body with extremities that are very cold. A preference, of course, for warmth, for warm drinks and warm weather and warm people. Cold and weak and painful lower back, of course, because that's where that kidney fire is located.
That's right.
So that back is going to be cold and weak and sore. They're also going to be exhausted. because qi is part of yang, and so when the yang goes down, that qi goes down too, and they're going to be very exhausted because this is a yang deficiency situation. They're going to be very weak. They're going to have a strong desire for sleep, curling up, keeping warm. The shen will be affected, very likely, depression or sluggishness. And there will be some yin deficiency as well, because yang comes from yin.
That's right.
Right. There'll be a weak digestion, very typically, right?
Right.
With
Not enough heat.
Well, yeah, not enough heat. So not enough heat to really call for a lot of food. The hunger will be very weak. And maybe typically watery diarrhea. Watery, of course, represents cold, internal cold, right? And the urine will typically be profuse and clear. Of course, that suggests cold, watery, cold, all that goes together, right? Face will typically be pale, withered even because of the yin deficiency, but pale or even gray. The tongue will be pale, could be swollen, but typically it will show some yin deficiency signs too, like narrow. And a lot of times what we'll see, like in hospital patients, we'll see a black coat.
Right.
It's really
That's
severely
really
young division.
severe.
That's really, that's dangerous. You can see that black coat. The pulse will be submerged, hardly fine. It'll be slow because it's cold, slow, right? Not a lot of friction. And frail, very difficult to find. It may be very short and difficult to find. So this is interior cold deficiency.
Right. And is that it for today, Doug?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've covered it
All
pretty
right.
much. 8 principles. Details are in my book, Chinese Medicine for Americans, available on my website, www.drkine.com.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us for American Dragon Presents Chinese Medicine in America. This was the 8 Principles, Part 2. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. You can email Dr. Kine at drkine@gmail.com. You can email me at joel@americandragon.com. We'll be happy to email you an answer. If we get a lot of questions about the same subject, we'll try to answer it on our next episode. So again, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Woof woof.